Good morning, classmates. Good morning to our dear professor, Dr. Apostol. I'm Amina A. Clerigo. I'm about to discuss two topics. The first one is the methods of data in information collection, and the second is the dimension of information. When it comes to the stage of data collection, now, what you have done before, you can talk about data collection is you had to have determined your objectives. What is it exactly that you're looking for that you want to achieve? And you may also want to determine who are your samples or who are your respondents are. Who are those people that you're going to collect your data from? Now, once you determine the objective and examples or respondents, this in turn determines which method or strategy you will use for your data collection. Now, one thing to remember is that at this stage, the more effort that you put in this, or the more effort that you're going to put in the data collection, the better quality of data is going to be. The tool that you will use can be effective only if the collection of data is effective. Therefore, data collection method is important, without which you cannot analyze the data effectively. This effective data collection not only reduces the efforts, but also time to achieve your sustainable results. There are different types of data that are applicable to methods in a particular data types. There are certain situations where management is sufficiently clear that no additional information is likely to change its decision. In such cases, it should be obvious that the value of information is negligible. So if the information collected does not lead to change or modify, the information has no value. In contrast, there may be certain situations where the decisions carry out for informations which are not available at any price. So between these two extremes, there are a large number of situations where the availability of additional information will improve the odds of making a good decision. In other words, if the manager has already made up his mind that regardless of what is revealed by the information, he will adhere to a particular line of action, there is no point in collecting the information. So generally, information is most useful where one is unaware of what is to be done, and where extreme values, let's just say huge profits or losses, are involved. So let's just have the value of information. By collecting the information, the management is simply reducing the odds of making a wrong decision. So in order that the information is really useful, it must have the characteristics such as relevant, available, accurate, current, and adequate. It may be mentioned that the available information may not have all the characteristics, but however, the most important characteristic is relevance. It must not be compromised in a trade-off. So we must know a very important question here. So a question arises here is, how much information should be collected in a given situation? So since the collection of information involves a cost, it is necessary to ensure that the benefits from the information is more than the cost involved in its collection. Problems to be solved can be under three. So the first is certainty, uncertainty, and risk. So we can say that under the certainty, a decision-making situation is of uncertainty when the decision maker has full knowledge about the alternatives and its outcomes. This is possible when perfect information is available. Therefore, the information has a perceived value in terms of decision making. The decision maker feels more secured when available information is received in case of decision making under an uncertainty or at risk. The information is called perfect information if it wipes out uncertainty or risk completely. However, perfect information is just a myth. So we can say that data is of uncertainty if it is incomplete due to reasons such as outdated sources or imprecise measurement. We can say that data is at risk if there is a potential loss of related data. The term applies to the failure in the storage, use, transmission, management, and security of the data. So let's just proceed to the methods of data and information collection. There are several methods that are available for the collection of the data. Actually, there are 8 methods of data and information collection, namely observation, experiment, survey, subjective estimation, transaction processing, we have the purchase from outside, we have the publication, and the government agencies. We can now divide the methods into 2. The first group is the method chosen for data collection and information about a specific problem. So it includes the observation, the experiment, the survey, and the subjective estimation. The second group pertains to the methods chosen to collect data on a routine basis without any particular problem. Let's talk about the first method, which is observation. Observation involves collecting information without asking a question. This method is more subjective, as it requires the researcher or the observer to add their judgment to the data. But in some circumstances, the risk of bias is minimal. For the key facts of observation, good source of providing additional information about a particular group can use a video to provide documentation. You can produce qualitative and quantitative data using the observation. For example, if a study involves the number of people in a restaurant at a given time, so unless the observer counts incorrectly, so we can say that the data should be reasonably reliable. Variables that require the observer to make distinction, such as how many millennials visit a restaurant in a given period, so can introduce a potential problem. So other examples, we can just have other examples just like site visits to an after-school program to document the interaction between the youth and the staff within the program. So observation, this can be done directly or even indirectly with the subject knowledge or unaware that you are observing them. You may choose to collect data through continuous observation, or we can set it by time periods depending on your project. Let's just proceed to the second method, which is experimental or the experiment. Experiment involves manipulating one variable to determine if changes in one variable cause changes in another variable. One of the variables can be manipulated and the other is measured. Again, one variable can be manipulated and then the other variable can be measured. These two variables are classified as the independent and the dependent variables. So the information on a specific parameter can be obtained through a control over the variables. The quality of the information depends on the design of an experiment. So in an experiment, data are mostly collected based on the cause and effect of the two variables being studied. This type of research are common to researchers that uses quantitative research approach. An experiment is usually an in-depth description of a process, experience, or structure at a single institution. In order to answer a combination of what and why question, it is generally involved a mixture of quantitative and qualitative technique. Okay, so the third method is the survey. We can define the survey as it's just another method of gathering information for research purposes. Information are gathered through a questionnaire, mostly based on the individual or group experiences regarding a particular phenomenon. We can just use mail, we can have self-completion, we can have the online, or maybe we can just use email. So response can be analyzed with quantitative methods. That means you are talking about numerical values, just like Likert type scales. Generally, it is easier to analyze than the qualitative. We can use the pretest, or we can have the pretest or the post-test for our comparison and analysis. There are several ways by which this information can be collected. Most notable ways are web-based questionnaire, and the other one is the paper-based questionnaire. That means it is printed form. Your respondents are going to answer the form. Okay, so the result of this method of data collection are generally easy to analyze. Survey is used for collecting data in survey research. They usually include a set of standardized questions that explore a specific topic and collect information about, maybe it can about demographics, maybe it can about opinions or attributes or behavior. The subjective estimation. Here, in the absence of all the first three methods, in the absence of the observation, in the absence of the experiment, and at the same time, the absence of the survey, the experts' opinions may be called to collect the information. Let's just have an example of subjective information. The data pertaining to future, like the alternate source of energy. Or maybe we can just have the lifestyle in the 21st century. So let's just go on. Transaction processing, that's the fifth method. The data exists but needs a processing and integration for reporting. Transaction processing is the process of completing a task and or user or the program request either instantly or at a runtime. Each transaction must succeed or fail as a complete unit. So it can never be partially complete. Maybe it can be, a successful transaction, or maybe it can be a failure. Examples are ledgers. So let's just proceed to the sixth method of data and information collection, which is the purchase from the outside. It is easily available at a price. It may be expensive and may be biased depending on the source. Example of this method are databases on a specific subject, or research studies, or market and technology studies. Now, let's just have the seventh method, which is the publications. We can say that data publishing is the act of releasing research data in published form for use by others. We can say that low cost, but it is low cost, but maybe project or emphasize one view or the other. In this method, we can say that information may be lopsided. That means it is not, balanced. The other one is high, the other one is low. Okay, examples is the government publications. We can have industry publications. We can have institutional publication, or maybe we can just have the various forms. So let's just have the eighth or the last method, which is the government agencies. This is available but may not be directly useful, not knowing the details of the collection analysis, and usually not the latest. Examples are bank or tax reports and findings. Now, let's just have the second topic, which is about the dimensions of information. Information may be understood to have various dimensions. However, for our subject, management information system, so the following dimensions of information will be of interest. The first, economic dimension, business dimension, and technical dimension. Okay, let's talk about the first dimension of information, which is the economic dimension. This dimension of information refers to the cost of information and as well as its benefits. Generating information costs money. To decide about the money to spend on information generation organization, a cost-benefit analysis should be undertaken. Measuring costs and benefits of information is difficult because of intangible characteristics of the information. So, about the cost of information, the following aspects of information may be useful. We have three. It includes the cost of acquisition the data, the cost of maintaining the data, and the cost of data access. So let's just talk about first a cost of acquiring the data. The cost of data acquisition from the point of view of time and resource, a piece of a data is supposed to be costly to acquire if it is recovered from a secondary source after processing it for a long time. On the other hand, the cost of the acquisition data is low for such cases when the customer is himself putting such data into the system. So that means your acquisition of data is very low if the customer is just, using the system. Cost of maintaining the data is the cost of maintaining the data in terms of the technical cost of space and efforts in maintaining it. A data source that requires a lot of technical efforts like indexing and it requires huge storage is said to be more costly. Let's just have the cost of data access. Cost in terms of resource requirement, we can have both processing or the network for accessing the data. Data that can be accessed after utilizing a lot of CPU and network resources is said to be costly to access. So now we need to remember a very important information. It says that the cost is related to the response time required to generate information and communicate it. Thus, for system with low response time, the cost is high. Similarly, cost also depends on the required accuracy, speed of generation. For more reliable and accurate system, costs are higher as compared to the system with relatively low accuracy. To the business dimension. That's the second dimension of information. Information can also be understood from its business dimension. Different types of information required by managers at different levels of the management hierarchy. The information needed by managers at strategic planning level are altogether different than those of operational managers. It is maybe because of the fact that the managers at different levels are required to perform different functions in an organization. This dimension relates to the business angle of information, its value to the organization, sustainability of getting the information from a managerial standpoint, accuracy and reliability of the information, its scope and appropriateness of the information are all the parameters for understanding the business dimension of a particular information. This dimension has got more to do with what of the information rather than how. First one is time dimension. Information has to be timely to be of any value. The basic utility of information within an organization is in decision making. If the information is not timely, then the decisions derived out of it will have poor quality. Hence, time is an important dimension of information system or the information. Let's talk about accuracy dimension. Information has to be accurate to satisfy the user. Again, it is also an important dimension as inaccurate information leads to bad decision making. Reliability dimension, information has to be reliable so that the user have confidence. And let's just talk about appropriateness dimension. Information must be relevant to the receiver. It must be appropriate to his needs. What about scope dimension? So, information should be within the scope. And it is also, or it must be complete. We're talking about the completeness. So let's talk about the last dimension, which is the technical dimension. This dimension of information refers to the technical aspects of the database. Various aspects of the database which are concerned under this dimension. It includes the capacity of the database, it includes the response time, it also includes the security, it also includes the validity and data interrelationship. So technical dimension is under the topic of the database management. So how are you going to manage your database? So it's about the technical dimension of the information. The technical dimension relates to the information gathering, the summarizing, the storing, and the retrieval, analysis, and cost aspect about the parameters of technical dimension of information. So we've got two. The first is the information gathering, and the second one is the analysis of methodology. Information gathering, that means it's the capturing of the data and then storing it. Okay? And what about analysis methodology? So it is about the processing methodology. It's talking about the process. How are you going to process the data on your database? So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned a lot from me, and I will do better for the next time. Thank you.